And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Bertha Vazquez is a retired science teacher who taught middle school for 34 years in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. She is the education director at the Center for Inquiry, an international nonprofit organization that promotes reason and science. Her multifaceted approach to teaching climate science has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, Earth Magazine, and in a book and film series by Lynn Cherry titled Empowering Young Voices for the Planet. Her new book, published by Corwin and co-authored with Kimmy Waite and Lauren Madden, is called What Teachers Want to Know About Teaching Climate Change, An Educator's Guide to Nurturing Hope and Resilience. And it is the focus of today's webinar. So now I will turn it over to Bertha.
Thank you, Margaret, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope this will be a productive session for you all. I'm very excited to be here, and as Margaret said, I now work for the Center for Inquiry, where I run the 3 programs that you see on the screen: the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, Science Saves, and Generation Skeptics. All we do is provide professional development, free webinars, and free resources for teachers around the country. But before I did this, I was as Margaret said, a middle school science teacher. I loved what I did. I really, really did. I was at a great school, great kids, parents, administration. It was really an ideal situation. I have to say it was, it's not easy. Teaching isn't easy by any means, but it was a really great time. It was great. I think I get kind of teary-eyed when I realize that chapter, or those chapters, I should say, are done. It was middle school, so I got a lot of that kind of nuttiness going on. But I taught everything. As you know, middle school teachers were the jack of all trades. So I taught everything from physical science to biology to, earth-based science. But my favorite thing and the most important thing to teach was environmental science. And I weaved it into every single class. We planted a bunch of trees around campus. I made sure a lot of my science fair projects had to do with environmental science, as these two are. I had every student every year write a paper on an alternative energy, where they compared our energy policy to other countries, compared the cost per kilowatt hour of solar versus wind versus geothermal, nuclear, etc. And I also made them think about like sources that say climate change isn't happening. I made them kind of follow the money trail and find out who the sources were, who were they backed by, that claimed that climate change was not happening. I also had every student track their electricity bills at home, and we saw big savings doing small things, like changing the thermostat 2 degrees and things like that. And we also did this. I'm going to show you this really quick. This is from a student. We had them each do a climate change video. I won't show you the whole thing, but it is really cute.
Wonderful day at the beach.
So I don't know if you have the volume there, but you start something silly, stop motion.
Hello, guys. That's my...
So every 6th grader in the school did a little video like that. And 2007, 2008 was a huge year. I decided to go school-wide, take it out of my classroom, take it out of my science department. And here's an English teacher, that's Mr. Redmond. They incorporated climate change into literature and their essays and their language arts classes. The art teacher incorporated it into her art classes. The German teacher had students write to students in Germany comparing energy policies. This happened with the Spanish, Italian, French, German teachers. The math teachers calculated the MPG of their cars, the actual MPG, and compared it to the sticker MPGs. The computer teacher went around the school and used these different plugins for the computers. Some classes made solar ovens and collected data. I mean, it was really a school-wide thing. The parents donated $40,000 and we greened the school. We got rain barrels. We had a water bottle drive. The custodian got involved. This is from the video that Margaret was talking about. And we even got a company to donate and paint the roof of our school white. We had a 5% drop that year in our energy bill. The district allowed us to see our energy bills. We saved, as you can see, over the course of that year, $66,000. A teacher at another school realized that if every school in the Miami-Dade County School District did this, the county would have saved $31 million. So climate change is not, a lot of times people think the environment and the economy are opposing forces, but that is definitely not the case. We took it outside the school. This is where we met with the executives at the airport, Miami International Airport, and we proposed some changes to them, and they took some of those changes and did them. As you can see there, those are the young ladies that were featured in the Lynn Cherry film. And to the top right, as I said, the school district allowed us to see our energy bills and our water bills. Well, that's a lot. We did a lot. We also got a lot of press. So I ended up, like the bio said, in the New York Times and NPR and a few other, multimedia outlets. And that is when Debbie, the wonderful Debbie Harden of Corwin Press, reached out and said, "Hey, will you write a book for us?" And I was like, "What? Okay." And she brought along on board these two wonderful, wonderful educators, Lauren Madden, who is a professor of elementary science education at the College of New Jersey, and Kimmy Waite, who's an assistant professor of child and family studies at California State. And together we wrote this wonderful book that I'm so proud of. The reason that I think this book is so important, there's a lot going on right now when you talk about climate change in this country and education, climate change education. This is a recent survey by the National Center for Science Education that's determined that 60% of teachers felt unprepared. That's a lot, 60%, to integrate climate change lessons into their core classes. And oh my goodness, 1 to 2 hours a year to climate education. That's nuts to me. And only one state right now, and that's New Jersey, explicitly includes the teaching of climate change in the state science standards. So we thought, hey, if only one state is including it, how do we write a book for the entire nation? One of the things that we did was we found places where climate change can be integrated. For example, whenever you do data literacy, you could do it with climate data. And the book has a whole chapter on that. We talked about the New Jersey experience and how they were able to get this passed in their state, but also how you can easily integrate it into language arts, math, and other courses. For example, most states have this standard: recognize ways plants and animals can impact the environment. One of the things that I do in my class is I would have students find a success story somewhere around the world. This is a beach cleanup in India, and I'd have them Photoshop themselves into this success story, kind of give them a little empowerment there. Transfer of energy. This is something all of us have to teach probably in middle school. Somewhere in the middle school curriculum, there's energy transfer. That's a perfect place to talk about clean energy versus fossil fuel energy. And there are some chapters in the book that tackle climate anxiety by promoting student agency. And of course, talking about the amazing economic surge that facing this problem head on can bring with it. Okay, nearly 300,000 new jobs were created in 2022 through in pursuing alternative energies. There are citizen science projects your students can get involved in. And the book also includes some success stories. We all need to hear some success stories when it comes to this. And one of the greatest ones is here in South Florida in Miami-Dade, Key Biscayne. There's a school called Mast Academy. And thanks to them, we're going to have 125 electric buses on the road by 2026. That happens to be paused right now, by the way, I have to say. The EPA is pausing that program at the moment. But I don't know what's going to happen because the three companies that we're buying the electric buses from are American companies. So again, we are boosting American economy, but it is on hold for the moment. And this is, I think, at the heart of the book. And of course, you're wondering, like, isn't this webinar supposed to be about don't believe everything you believe? What the heck is she talking about climate change for? Just hold on, because I think climate change is one of the most misunderstood topics out there. And this book does a great job explaining why it's misunderstood. I don't know how many science teachers we have out there, but if you can drop in the chat a second, if you received this, I received this probably about 9 years ago. We got this beautiful glossy DVD and book from the Heartland Institute explaining why some scientists disagree about global warming. So it's confusing. Is it happening? Is it not happening? There's deliberate confusion around this topic being created. And that leads to that number right there. I worry about parent complaints when it comes to teaching climate change. Teachers worry about it. I'm in there for sure. But here's something that caught us all by surprise. 80 to 86% of parents in the United States want climate change taught. I didn't realize it was that high. And because this topic isn't like other topics, like just teaching physical states of matter or the laws of motion, because we do have to navigate the politics of climate change, I was so excited when Debbie allowed me to dedicate an entire chapter, and it is my favorite chapter, to the politics of climate change. How do we address this topic in the classroom when facts may not be what matters? And remember, 80 to 86% of parents want you to teach climate change. So I'm going to give you a few seconds here. What is critical thinking to you? As a teacher, I'm assuming most of us here are educators. What does it mean if I say, hey, what's critical thinking? How do you teach critical thinking in the classroom? What is it that you're teaching when you teach critical thinking in the classroom? I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat myself, see if there's anything coming in here. To think for themselves, not to be gullible. Evaluate all aspects of a given situation or problem to make the best decision. Okay. Well, let me show you. Oh, here. Ability to assess, draw conclusions based. That is exactly, Lisa Mueller, what I would have written. Have your students figure out, draw conclusions based on information, data presented to them. That's what I would write. The ability to use many sources, etc. So I asked this exact question to teachers around the country. And let me show you what I got. Kind of what you expect. It was a very informal survey. Only about 55 people answered it, but it did come from around the country. Analyzing data or drawing conclusions, just what Lisa said, got 28 mentions. Problem solving, using data, 20 mentions. Evaluating evidence, source credibility, some of you mentioned that in the chat, 20 mentions. But you know what was mentioned only once? Identifying your own personal biases. Identifying flaws in your own thinking. Only one person mentioned that. Now, here are my two wonderful colleagues. I'm here in the orange astronaut outfit, and that's Anna with the purple hair, and that's Ellie with the pink hair. They're both in my acknowledgments. We braved the Florida education system together. And I ask you, what if facts aren't the problem? That's what chapter 4 is about. Because you see, Anna, me, Ellie, we functioned under what's called the information deficit model. And by the way, some of these slides come from my wonderful friend Melanie Tresick King. You'll see a picture of her soon. I do want to shout out to her. Information deficit model if someone says to you, I don't believe in climate change, or I don't accept climate change, you think that that's one tidbit, there's one misinformation in that head that you can pull out like a toothpick. What would Hannah do? What would I do? We would say, oh, no, honey, let me explain. Let me show you this graph with the temperature anomalies over the last 50 years. Let me explain to you the ice core data from the Antarctic. Let me show you the increase in fire and hurricanes and the warming of the waters and all the stuff that we talk about. But what if facts don't matter? Because actually, our belief system, our facts in our head are not like little toothpicks that I can just reach into your head and pull out the one that's wrong and throw it out. Our heads work more, our beliefs work more like a web. Everything that we believe is kind of tied together. It's more a web of belief than an information deficit model. So here's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that we as teachers, we're missing this piece, this understanding of how we develop and form beliefs. It's called epistemic vigilance, processing new information and determining if it is credible or not. I say that we as educators are very good at teaching students to evaluate the source of the information. I say that we as educators are pretty good at teaching kids to evaluate the claim, where the claim itself and the source. Not just science teachers. I think social studies teachers obviously are doing this. Language arts teachers are doing this. But this is what I think we're missing. And it's that third component, which is evaluating ourselves, evaluating the receiver. Okay? And as we go through these slides, it's really easy for you to go, oh, God, yeah. I mean, can you believe people think the earth is flat? Or, oh, my God, that aliens landed at Roswell? But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about me, and I'm talking about you. I want all of us to look in the mirror. And this is the thing. How much information is exchanged in one day? How much information are you processing in a single day? Well, I don't even know what some of these numbers mean. I don't know what a petabyte is. I think I know what a terabyte is. But that last one is the one that helps me the most. 212 million DVDs per day of information are being produced. And I ask you, oh my, how much of that information is misinformation or what's known as disinformation? Kids are getting it all the time because they are on social media way too much. Maybe all of us are. So it's not just stuff like climate change or vaccines. There's a lot of wellness misinformation out there. I don't know if you all remember during not these last Olympics, but the ones before, Michael Phelps had those red marks on his back. Well, the Google searches for red marks on Michael Phelps' back just went through the roof that day. It's called cupping. It can actually lead to serious burns, and it does absolutely nothing for your athletic performance. But shoot, Michael Phelps is doing it, right? We have these hot magnetic bracelets, and we have gummy bears that help you lose weight. How do our students, I'm overwhelmed. How do we teach them to see this stuff and determine if it's credible or not, and to determine how they themselves are perceiving it? I think this is a very, very, very powerful cartoon. Very powerful cartoon. And remember that 32%, and this is Twitter or X, 32% of global web traffic on that account, on that platform last year, 2 years ago, was bad bot actors, not even human actors. So let's quickly go over the 3 types of misinformation. There's straight up misinformation. Have you ever shared a social media post without checking if it's true? You just assumed it was true and you clicked share. For example, there's a new virus out there and you find out that if you gargle with salt water, you won't get it. You want to help your friends. You want to help your family. So you go ahead and share it. You're not trying to hurt anyone. So that's just regular misinformation. Then there's disinformation, which I think climate misinformation, a lot of it falls under this category, which is disinformation. It's false, but it spread knowingly. Like the tobacco industry promoting that maybe smoking doesn't cause cancer, the oil industry promoting that maybe climate change is not caused by humans. And finally, there's malinformation. This is a word that if you type it into a Word document, it gets underlined like it's misspelled, okay? Using truthful information, but the wrong way with an intent to harm. I think the one we're most familiar with, of course, is getting that Bank of America or that Citibank email telling us that our account's been hacked. Everything looks correct. My 82-year-old mother fell for this, and my 20-year-old son fell for this. Luckily, they called me, they called my husband. We're like, no, do not click on that thing. Do not give information out. Here's a terrible, terrible example of malinformation. This is a real photo. Remember, malinformation often uses real looking stuff or actually real things. This photo is of a terrorist attack in London on a bridge, March 2017. And this Twitter user, known as @SouthLoneStar, who describes himself as proud Texan American patriot, and I'm saying himself, but I don't know the sex of this individual. Quote, Muslim woman pays no mind to terror attack, casually walks by a dying man while checking phone, hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Does this trigger you? It triggered me. And that's one of the signs. You have to be even more careful if you're being triggered. Well, guess what? There is no guy in Texas @SouthLoneStar. There is no human on this planet @SouthLoneStar. This is a Russian bot. And that poor lady on the phone walking by was calling 911, or in the case of England, 999. They found out where she lived. She received death threats. Her children were threatened. All because of this tweet, which wasn't even written by a human. Here's another one, Newsbreak. It's a free app, and it has roots in China. It's the most downloaded news app in the US. There was a shooting, supposedly, in Bridgeton, New Jersey, amid rising gun violence in small towns. Guess what? Nothing about this is true. No such shooting took place. Entirely false. So let's look at some of this types of misinformation that now that you understand the three main types, let's see how they fall into another way to categorize them. We can categorize them by fake news, for example, satire. A lot of people fell for this. This is a joke. Halloweeners. You know why they fell for it? Because they had a bias already in place that Americans have unhealthy diets. So when they see this, they're going to accept it. They're going to go, oh, yeah, those Americans, well, boy, we or they have unhealthy diets. Another type would be out of context. Retreat if you say no to animal testing. This looks horrible. All those poor little cats. Oh, my goodness. Well, guess what? It was at the University of Florida, and they were neutering kitties and getting them ready for adoption. So you have satire, you have out of context, you have manipulated images, completely manipulated. These are two separate images that were put together during the Australian fires a couple years ago. I tried it. This dog is sitting behind me right now. I am not techie, but I made my dog the president of the United States with 5 minutes on a simple Photoshop app. Okay, so they're out there and nobody's protecting us, and you have to protect yourself, and we have to protect our students. So we have to learn what these are. Completely fabricated. Here's another one. Pope Francis shocks world, endorses Donald Trump for president. Guess what? Didn't happen. But you know what? I fell for this one. I thought this was true. If I were to run, I'd run as a Republican. They're the dumbest group of voters in the country. He never said that. Never said that. I didn't know that was wrong until October of last year when somebody pointed it out to me. And of course, we have science's pretenders. We have pseudoscience, where you have very low standard of evidence. This happened to me this morning. Somebody got a bruise. They put some homeopathic medicine on it and said, look, 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 it's getting better. This stuff works. No multiple trials, No double-blind protocol, no repeated studies and presenting in peer-reviewed journals. Just, I put it on my leg and it looks better. Low standard of evidence. That's pseudoscience. Its evil twin is science denial. And this is where we talk about climate change. I don't care how much evidence you give me for climate change. I just not going to believe it. Here's some examples. This is on Netflix right now. I highly recommend the show. Belle Gibson said she had cancer, brain cancer. In 2012, her app was App of the Year for Apple. No cancer, completely fabricated. She just made the whole thing up. An example of science denial would be the cigarette companies did with tobacco smoking. Doubt, just create some doubt. They're doing the same thing with climate change now, not the tobacco industry, but the oil industry. That's all you got to do. Another book I highly recommend is Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. And it talks about how they were able to fabricate this doubt. So what's going on? Why do we fall for misinformation? And notice that I use the first person plural pronoun there, we. Why do we fall for misinformation? Not the flat earthers, us. I love this book. Nathan's a friend of mine, and it's about all the errors in our bodies because we are not designed. We are products of evolution, and we carry our evolutionary legacy or history within ourselves. Evolution's not just out the window. As I look out the window, it's inside my body. For example, my back. Fish were never meant to walk on two legs. And that is why the most common complaint, I believe, of Americans, and I'm sure it's worldwide, is a painful back, a backache. Look at how difficult it can be for a human female to give birth. We stood up on two legs, first of all, and our brains grew very, very quickly. A human is essentially born 6 months premature. A baby chimpanzee can sit up a few days after being born. Our babies take 6 months to sit up because if we waited any longer, if the gestation period of a human was any longer, the baby wouldn't survive or the mom wouldn't survive or both, sadly. So here's another thing that we carry in our evolution that isn't a great thing. I don't have to tell you that the knee is an unfinished joint and often suffers injuries, the human knee. Spinal column, we can go all the way back to one of our oldest ancestors, a worm-like primitive creature called Amphiox that had a little jelly-like dorsal neural tube on the dorsal side, and it had jelly in it. And millions of years later, you have the mammalian, or not just the mammalian, but the vertebral column of all of the animals with backbones. And unfortunately, it's got some negatives to it. Our face, my students loved seeing the blind spot. You take those 2 dots, science teachers, right? And you move the paper towards the person's face as they cover one eye, and one of the dots disappears. So we have a blind spot. We also keep our dentists and our orthodontists very busy because our mouth got smaller, our teeth got smaller, but there really isn't enough space in there. And my personal facial favorite, the fact that the drainage hole on the sinus in your cheek, the drainage hole's at the top of the sinus, not at the bottom, which is why we get these terrible colds that you don't see other organisms dealing with. So there's another one. Our face flattened very quickly. I mean, relatively speaking, of course, and the drainage hole kind of ended up at the top. Okay, so what about our brains? We've got the knee, we've got the back, we've got the teeth. Is there anything that is a product of evolution that perhaps helped our ancestors survive, but isn't the greatest thing for us? Yes. I want you to picture your ancestor walking the plains of Africa, and there's rustling in the grass behind them. Does that ancestor pull out a clipboard and a pen and go, let me see. What is happening? What is that behind me? Is that an animal about to attack me? Let me write that down. Maybe it's my friend trying to play a trick on me. Maybe it's just the wind. Do you know what? That person is not your ancestor because that person got killed. That person got eaten. Your ancestor is the one that took off running, okay? That just, boom, had an incomplete picture, but drew an inference very quickly, sized up the situation and took off. This is going to lead to cognitive biases. This is going to lead to false memories and emphasis on anecdotes. And probably the biggest one that's polarizing our country right now is tribal thinking. And as you can see, you've been mesmerized maybe by that little optical illusion. You know it's not moving, and yet it appears to be moving because your brain is filling in the gaps. So why are we vulnerable to misinformation? I'd like to propose a wonderful analogy by Jonathan Haidt. It's the elephant and the rider analogy. I think, let me say when I get new information, I think I'm being reasonable and smart and logical, right? I know what my IQ is, and I think I get this new information and I'm processing it. No, that's the rider sitting on the elephant. My logical side is the rider sitting on the elephant, but the elephant is my emotions. Do you think I can control that elephant? That elephant's going to go wherever that elephant wants to go. And that tweet, for example, on the terrorist attack on the bridge, that triggered my elephant. And I was already thinking, this darn Texan, I bet you I know what political party he's from or whatever. It was created to trigger my elephant. So these are the things that we actually kind of fall victim to. We're not really processing new information through the logical side. We have motivated reasoning, for example. I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to find what it is I want to find. If I want to believe that the aliens landed in Roswell, I'm going to Google darn it and find stuff that tells me that the aliens landed in Roswell. I'm going to see confirmation bias. Every time information connects with my belief system, I'm going to accept it. And every time it doesn't, or it shows an opposite picture, I'm going to reject it. But it's so subconscious that I may not even think about it. Emotions is one that really plays on me. I get emotional when I see certain tweets or posts, and I know that's affecting my thinking. There's repetition. The more we hear something, of course, we're polarized, and we go to who do we trust? We trust our tribe, we trust our parents, we trust our coaches, we trust the people around us. So these two, I think, really play a role in whether or not we accept if climate change is real or not, for example. So this is what's actually being used to form our beliefs. It's not the logical side of us. It's our personal experiences. It's the wisdom that we receive from our tribe. It's stuff like that. Our wonderful tribe kept us alive, okay? But this is our tribe now. We can find our tribe online and really cocoon ourselves in our echo chambers. And remember that the more emotional you feel about a topic, the more careful you need to be when you get new information. So here's my friend Melanie. Some of these slides are hers. I gave her a shout out, and she did something pretty amazing about a month ago. She says, Bertha, I'm presenting to a group of very, very friendly, progressive people. I'm going to give them an evolution quiz. And I said, well, progressives, they're probably going to accept evolution. Yeah, I know. Can you check my quiz? Sure. I have a degree in biology. I checked her quiz and I said, geez, Mel, this is hard. I mean, I think you need first year biology in college to pass this quiz. And she was good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. She asked the group, do you believe in evolution? Do you accept evolution? And they all said yes, 100%. Everybody in the room accepted evolution. She gave them the quiz. They all failed the quiz. So my point is this, and the reason I'm picking on a group, sorry, I have to pick on somebody, is we think we accept stuff because we're logical thinkers, but we may accept it simply because it's our tribe and our tribe accepts it. And we all do this. Now, you may say, well, maybe that group of people understand the process of science, and they understand that evolution is a scientific theory that's been developed through hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pieces of evidence and repeated data, and nothing's ever disproved it. And maybe they trust science, so they accept evolution without really understanding evolution. But Melanie is a young Earth creationist, and she says that that's exactly, well, sorry, she was raised young Earth creationist. She's now a biology professor. But she said that as a child, that's why she accepted young Earth creationism, because it was what her parents and her church told her to believe. So I know that makes it's uncomfortable, but I want us to think about ourselves. Why do we accept climate change? Why do we accept evolution? How do we process new information? Because remember, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. I really like these two slides. What I've determined after lots of research into this topic of misinformation is that the best thing that we can model in a classroom is humility and curiosity. When you're wrong, it's okay. What you want to do is be humble. It's okay to be wrong, and to promote curiosity. Wow, this is great. We're wrong. We're going to learn something new. Don't tie yourself too closely to your beliefs in case they are wrong. So what do we do in the classroom? How do we do this in the classroom? I have a few points, and these points are pointed out in chapter 4 of this book, a little bit, more expounded upon in the book. First of all, introduce this concept of flawed thinking early in the school year. Post Richard Feynman's quote on your door. Stress that scientists design experiments to prove themselves wrong, not right, and model this behavior throughout the year so that when you get to your climate change unit, when you get to your unit on evolution, you don't just say, well, you have to believe this because it's in the book. By that point, the students will say, okay, I understand this process of science. I understand that biases and stuff play a role in how we accept the new information, and we must keep our biases in check. Bring that analogy into your classroom and talk about how, when you get new information, check yourself. It's almost like a mindfulness exercise, right? Check, how do I feel about this bit of news? Do I love it? If you love it, you better check it 2-3 times and do a lateral check. Get out of that news source and check another news source. This house is haunted. You really want this house to be haunted because that is so cool. Don't look on the website that tells you that house is haunted. Go to another site and check. Bias sometimes outweighs fact. Ask yourself, do you want to believe it? Or you don't want to believe it? How are my emotions playing a role here? What are my motivations playing a role here? Be humble. I don't know why people think, I guess, sometimes they come across that way. I don't know, but to me, scientists are humble. And I tell my students, if you don't like being wrong, don't be a scientist or don't be a science teacher, because you're going to be wrong. And it's an opportunity to learn something new. Teach the difference between reasoning and rationalizing, following evidence to a logical conclusion, or cherry picking evidence that justifies your conclusion. And that's why science works. Okay, that t-shirt, by the way, is for sale. I noticed at the Center for Inquiry shop. Science works because it puts guardrails in place to protect us from our own biases, our own tribal thinking, our own motivated reasoning. Introduce the term science denial and pseudoscience early in the school year. Now, going back to climate change in a second, there is one thing, in addition to teaching people, ourselves included, to be mindful of how we process new information. One of the things that seems to work is addressing what's known as the consensus gap. This is from crankyuncle.com. This is, by the way, a free game that you could download for your phone and your students can download. It's called Cranky Uncle, and it teaches you to identify flawed thinking, okay, and flawed arguments. Cranky Uncle is essentially that guy at Thanksgiving that doesn't accept climate change. That's why he named it that. This is based on the work of John Cook, by the way. He's an Australian psychologist. So we have a climate consensus gap. 97% of climate scientists agree that it's global warming's happening and we're causing it. I think it's actually probably higher based on all of the evidence that they have. But look what teachers think. 21% of teachers answered, I don't know what percent of scientists think climate change is happening. Only 39% of teachers got it right. That 81 to 100%, like I said, 97% of scientists know that climate change is happening. This is a problem. There's a big consensus gap between the real consensus, 97, and what we perceive it to be, 39. That's a 58% consensus gap. You're going to get those moderates in your classroom back when you show them that number. They're just not aware about it. Those people in the middle of the road, you might get those kids back. So anyway, we're almost concluding at this point, and I wanted to leave some time for questions. These are the 3 programs that I'm running. The one that I talked about the most today was the one on the right. That's Generation Skeptics. If you go to that website, dozens of free resources to get kids thinking about misinformation, addressing, not just evaluating the claim and the source, but themselves. We also have TIES, which is all evolution education. We have Science Saves, which is promoting science appreciation, giving away tons of money and scholarships to high school seniors, and a bunch of lessons that you can incorporate to promote science appreciation. And yes, it is all free. Everything's free. And if you're in Philly, any of you going to be in Philadelphia for NSTA, I'll be there. Please look me up. So yeah, I really think we need this, not just for our students, but for ourselves, to develop and foster understanding of the world through inquiry-based learning. Anyway, I'm going to hand the mic back to Margaret because she has a couple of things to say here about the book that I briefly covered at the beginning of this talk, and I focused mostly on chapter 4.
Yeah, Bertha, I don't know if you have any other closing words, but I wanted to thank you for today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And, if there are any questions out there, I'm going to stop sharing. That's all right. And I'll take questions. And
do those resources help with elementary schools too?
Yes. So all 3 TIES, Science Saves, and Generation Skeptics has elementary resources. They all have, elementary resources. What do you use to make your slides? Just good old-fashioned PowerPoint. Yeah, nobody's going to save us from misinformation, only ourselves. So I like the idea of the mindfulness. When you get new information, how do you feel about it? Do you really like it, or do you really not like it? Are you inclined to believe it? Are you inclined not to believe it? Kind of check yourself. And certainly don't share something without checking it, because there's nobody out there checking for us. And so, we are responsible for our own sharing and accepting or passing on of information. I don't believe the main social media sites are doing it. So we need to do it.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to end on that note. And thank you again, Bertha.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.